Good day, everyone. My name is Sivakumar Lakshmanan. I'm the CEO of antuit.ai, Zebra Technologies company. I have with me here Andy Kettlewell, GVP of Inventory and Analytics at Walgreens. Today, we are here to talk about how Walgreens, with support from Antuit's technology, went about transforming their forecasting and demand planning technology and processes. We are going to keep this very slideshow light and then make it more of a, open, frank conversations on what we did well, what are the lessons learned, and what can other people take away from this session. So we will have some time for the questions towards the end. If we are running out of time to have the questions, feel free to meet us at booth number 309. That is where Antuit is stationed. We will be happy to have further discussion. So it's an excellent timing for this session because Andy yesterday won the Retail Innovators Award from Retail Touchpoint at the back of this initiative, which is, we take pride in our customer success, and no better way to recognize that than an innovation award for one of our key sponsors who has kindly agreed to share this wisdom with the larger audience here. So thank you, Andy, for doing this, and with this I'll hand this back to you to talk about the initiative and Walgreens.
Yes, so thank you for having me, Siva. It's a pleasure to be on stage presenting to so many people who care about retail. A bit of an introduction for those who might not know who Walgreens is. I assume everybody in the US is pretty familiar. We have a store really close to almost everybody in the country, all 50 states, and Puerto Rico. But if you're joining us internationally or you're not familiar, Walgreens services our communities with health services, healthcare products, front end, over-the-counter medicines to more than 9 million customers a day through almost 9,000 retail locations. We're very proud of how we deliver those health services, be it tens of millions of vaccinations every year between COVID, flu, shingles, let alone the just being there for mom and dad in the middle of the night for a fever reducer for your child. We take great pride in servicing our communities to be there to help promote health and wellness throughout the country. With that, I'd be remiss to share that we're a big company, so you see a lot of big numbers here. And aiding this initiative that we'll talk through about moving to using artificial intelligence for demand planning, we're aided by voluminous amounts of data, which you'll see in the middle here of over 100 million active members in our loyalty program, as well as a really good infrastructure on core data.
Excellent. And I cannot think of many companies with this kind of scale. I can even count this with one hand, right? What I'm curious, Andy, is about the timing of the demand transformation that you ventured into. 2019, it's the world before pandemic. It's hard to believe there was a world before pandemic. Today, it's very evident that everyone have to do something about how they predict the demand, how they plan the demand, and manage the inventory.
That's right.
2019, you started this process. Walgreens decided that it is time to take leapfrog how we predict and plan our demand and place our inventory. What did you know?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So I think we'll all agree that our customers are changing faster than ever, and the pandemic has radically accelerated adoption of new technologies, adoption of new ways to fulfill customer demand. But there's three big areas that we were thinking about, back in 2017, 2018, that were already changing with our customers. I'll put up some visuals here. We're not going to go through slide by slide, but the first is how Walgreens was changing how we talk to our customers. Right? I joined Walgreens over 17 years ago when we had about 3,000 stores. And you could predict demand pretty regularly just by how we printed our weekly ad and put it through the Chicago Tribune or the LA Times. Like, we could know what we're going to sell based on what's on the front page of the ad. And it was a very static model for how we did retail in food, drug, mass in the 80s and in the 90s. But our customers reacted to that. But starting in the mid-2010s, Walgreens really started to adapt and change. We no longer print a weekly Sunday ad. We're talking to our customer with our loyalty program through our app, right? We're engaging with mass personalized media. And with that, it's different stimuli for your customer. And so it would be a bit naive to think that the old ways of demand planning and trying to predict with, core regression or basic statistical analysis of what happened last time you ran this ad is going to be the same as when you're talking to a different set of consumers in a different way all the time. And so the first bit is we're just talking to our customers differently. That'll change. The second is we're serving our customers differently, right? And so for Walgreens, investing a lot more into health services, whether it is immunizations like I talked about, whether it's health testing in store, whether it is moving into audiology or vision care, right? The core box of Walgreens and how we serve those customers is changing, which changes the buying patterns from what was happening before, but also, most retailers had started down the buy online, pick up in store, or ship from store journey early on, or knew that it was going to be coming. And so as you serve your customer differently, we knew that demand patterns would be dynamic. But I think one of the largest elements which caused us to look at the environment and to be an evangelist for the use of artificial intelligence in demand planning is who and what messages are being delivered to our customers that aren't coming from Walgreens. And so when we think about this, there are so many more external factors that impact consumer demand. And whether a customer is going to walk into a Walgreens or one of your stores and convert and shop on any given day, it would be arrogant to think that you are the only voice influencing customer demand for your customer. However, we need to understand what those other influences are in our customers' lives and those messages that they are receiving so that we can predict that behavior, so that we can position inventory accordingly. So whether that's a viral TikTok adoption of the latest amazing ship to your home in 30 minutes from Walgreens store, or the latest influencer talking about the best mascara on the market, causing some viral activity, we have to be cognizant of those messages, but also what's happening in our customers' lives. Could be microeconomic factors. Did a factory close up the street? Are we seeing higher rates of unemployment? Are we seeing different influencers that are going to cause our customers to behave differently when they come into our stores to buy more or less or shift what they are buying? And so the reality is, long story short, Siva, the customer was changing and the old tools had no idea and couldn't see that the customer was changing, and we're going to set us up to absolutely miss servicing our customer.
That's an excellent point. The customer was always changing, and the pandemic only accelerated that trend.
Yeah.
How does this new world of multiple factors influencing your demand? It's incredible to think of TikTok having influence on people walking into Walgreens store. You often don't connect those dots. How does this translate into your day-to-day demand planning process? How did you think about, okay, now that this is happening, now the old ways of working may or may not work anymore?
Yeah.
How does this translate into your business as usual?
Yeah, so there's a couple of elements to that, right? So I think about internal adoption of new technology and change. First, there's your executive team, right? And so I would say at Walgreens, we have a really strong executive team that is all oriented around our customer and realize that our customer is changing. And in fact, Walgreens was making these investments into mass personalized media and trying to lead in this space. And so we knew that was happening. But we had to trust and test if the technology existed for us to bring that to life. And what we found when we zoom into our planners, right, who are closest to our customers and to our categories, as we tested the technology, as we validated hypotheses that we had on influencers of demand, and whether it's simple things like weather patterns influencing an allergy season, or whether it's more complex like shoot, who's playing at Madison Square Garden tonight? Is it Disney on Ice, or is it a Knicks game? There's a very different customer coming by the Dwayne Reed store. We found that more often than not, the technology was validating what our planners thought intuitively was happening with demand. And rather than finding that their job was to change the system to match the intuition or what they were seeing for results, more and more they were validating their own hypotheses, but then being able to explore new hypotheses of what could be influencing demand at a more granular level. And when we talk about a granular level at Walgreens, we're thinking about every item in every store every day for those demand patterns, and in some cases hourly demand, where that's material. And so the adoption curve wasn't as challenging as we had thought, because we were scared about black boxes, or when you have 3 variables and now you're going to 50 variables influencing consumer demand, will that be too much for a human to understand what those outputs are? However, we found more often than not, it's reducing the number of manual touches and manual work our planners have to do, because we're teasing out the insights that they inherently already knew.
And does democratization of knowledge, the AI knowledge that broadly exists, and some of this information is not privy to select set of people now, it's widely available.
Yeah.
Does that naturally help the planners and the analysts who are involved in this process to skill up and then be more ready for a transformation like this?
It really does, right? So, I think about this, 30 years ago, there was a role in a company as computer operator, right? And I'm going a little off script on Siva, so he doesn't know where I'm going with this. But everybody uses computers in their day-to-day world right now. I believe the same thing around the application of artificial intelligence right now. So it's going to become as ubiquitous to have data science as part of your end-to-end demand planning, supply chain execution going forward. And so when we think about the users, our users are becoming much more adept at even coding directly in R and Python, or moving into these languages. It becomes a bit more native for them. But where that goes is a hunger. We believe we're really at just the infancy, and so for every hypothesis that we validated, we're getting curious and hungry and coming up with 50 more of what else could we do to better understand the dynamics of consumer demand, so that we can show up for our customers right and satisfy those needs. And so I think it's a hunger and a curiosity, and has actually created a bit of an insatiable appetite now with many of our users, Siva, to get even deeper.
And we see the trend broadly in the market as well. The capability level that is involved in interpreting a technology like this has significantly increased in the last 3-4 years.
That's right.
In particular, hence a lot of change management resistance that we saw in the market has considerably reduced. And at Walgreens scale, we are talking about 300 million time series, right? And 9,000 stores and a few tens of thousands of SKUs there. And it's humanly impossible for a planner or an analyst to go and interpret the demand for each one of them, right? How do people think about a technology like this helping deal with a wide and broad variety of problems when you have SKUs that sell every day, every hour, and you have SKUs that sell once in a month?
Yeah.
How do you marry this with your process, people, and the technology?
I think I might reframe your question just a bit, Siva, is that through this journey for Walgreens over the last 3 to 4 years, we're not talking about SKUs. We're not in love with the item, we're in love with the customer and satisfying that customer demand. And this is actually one of those areas of learning that really came through for Walgreens and many retailers and CPGs through the pandemic, is how are we delivering customer satisfaction with fulfilling demand? And so we're less and less worried about a SKU level forecast accuracy, and I'm far more worried about, did I fulfill the consumer demand? And so these moments of scarcity that are now commonplace with supply volatility, right? I think about baby formula, right? If a plant that manufactures baby formula shuts down and now there's scarcity in the market, how does our customer behave? How do we show up differently? How will that customer respond, and how do we take care of them? And we're thinking more and more about solution sets with that. We're thinking more and more about what will happen, making sure that do I have the right solution, and hopefully I have then the right brand, and then do I have the right size and the flavor that our consumer might want. But we have a relentless passion to ensure that we always have a solution on shelf at Walgreens at any time in need. And I think about that as a parent, or if you're a caretaker for a family member who may have chronic conditions. Being in every community and having stores that are open 24 hours and that can deliver the way Walgreens does, we view this as a very, very big responsibility in our communities with life-saving medicine. And if you've ever had that sick kid with a fever or an earache in the middle of the night, we have to make sure that a solution is there. And so reframing for us, Siva, that complexity to a bit of a new North Star, away from where data science or statistics would take you. But what we're all here as retailers to do is servicing the customer has been radically transformational for us in how we segment, and then how we leverage our consumer insights about how does the consumer make choices in our store, and choices to come to a Walgreens or a competitor, or choices of to buy this product versus that product, and what the stimuli are, so that we have this better understanding, so we can apply the right data science to predict that consumer behavior.
That's a great point, Andy. How would, we have several retailers in this room, and several of them attending this session. How would a retailer approach? What's your advice for a retailer looking to transform their demand, looking to implement an AI technology to have better prediction, to have better control on their inventory decisions, etc. We see the news ripe with retailers getting their inventory positions wrong, and Walgreens continues to be the North Star in this space. Do you mind sharing your secret?
Well, Siva, I think every retailer is still working at inventory positioning and with the volatility in the market, and we're no exception in that. I think it comes back to if you think your customer is static, stay still, right? Keep using the technology that's tried and true to try to predict that demand. If you do believe, though, that your customer is changing, and there's other voices, and there's other influencers on demand, and we're not in a static world, well, then you're probably going to need to think of some different ways to go through there. And in a journey like this, we knew our problem statement that there had to be a different way, but quite candidly, we weren't sure if the technology was ready to adopt that. We didn't know if our organization was ready. We didn't know if we had the data inputs to do it. And so we tested, right? We took a small sample for Walgreens. What did we take? So about 10, 15 million SKUs to item store combinations, and ran it through engines. And we learned, and we guessed, and we tested those hypotheses, and then we learned, and we adapted from there. And for us, and for any retailer going through there, nothing beats live tests with your own data and testing your own hypotheses here. And that's exactly what we did, and what I would recommend is to have a vision of what you think those factors of demand are, tested in the marketplace. Antuit was a great partner for Walgreens, and other firms would probably like to test with you too. But that's how you're going to know. That's how you're going to drive the adoption if you think you can do it. But the technology is ready. The mass scales of data that is commercially available, that is syndicated, that is even public domain, is ready. And most retailers have a very, very strong consolidation of data that is ready to go feed into the models. But you can't let perfect be the enemy of better. And so this is really that iterative process for us. The other avenue for us was, once we had a feeling that the technology was working and where it was working, we started rolling out. But we were methodical, right? We took over a year to roll out every category, every geography for Walgreens. And if we weren't getting the results we liked, and that matched what the consumer was telling us with how they were buying, we tested. We tried different hypotheses and then rolled out those categories once we reached the benchmarks we expected to for how well we could predict consumer demand for that solution set.
Interesting. So test before you buy, and you believe the technology and the data readiness is there in the market. And a lot of retailers that we work with and we talk to have this concern that I do not have the data quality or the data maturity to venture into a exercise like this. Do they wait for it to be ready and for that utopian world, or do they get going with an exercise and continuously improve?
Yeah, retail is an imperfect science, right? If you wait to be perfect, you're going to let the market pass you by here. If we thought that, there's, I think Walgreens right now has about 50 external data streams that we're eyeing that we think could continue to enhance this, and all could do really well. Some might fail. However, we're getting and reaping quite a few results from even just a dozen external data sources coming in and influencing demand. And so I think it's about a growth mindset, continual learning here, because this is, if you ever think you're going to get a forecast perfect, I mean, you're going to waste an entire career trying to get to there. But the time for us really was yesterday on this. I think there's an element to this that, thank goodness, we started a year before the pandemic came through. But the way our learning's accelerated around consumer demand, I almost wish we would have started 2 or 3 years earlier.
And how would someone measure success for an initiative like this? Is this a forecast error reduction exercise? Is it a planning process efficiency exercise? How would people think about, how would they measure success for an initiative like this?
Yeah, the only person who cares about forecast accuracy is somebody who's just focused on a forecast, but that reframing around customer solutions and customer satisfaction has to be the North Star. This isn't a short-term game. I mean, I don't wake up in the morning and share with our CEO how good our MAPE bias WAPE is. What we really care about is our customer satisfaction, our NPS, the stickiness, being there for a mom, a dad, a caretaker, being there when you're sick, and being able to satisfy that demand so that you want to keep coming back to Walgreens so that you can rely on us, because that full lifetime value of a customer and a patient is far more valuable for us. And so if you have that right North Star, you can disaggregate that into, how do I bring that to life, right? Can I bring higher levels of product availability, right? Am I getting less feedback around out of stocks, or how I satisfy that demand? But then equally, if I can drive fewer errors, you will see that in the outcomes on the balance sheet. You will find that you'll be able to buy, procure, deploy, allocate inventory more successfully. You'll see some of those traditional measures come through, but holistically for our transformation here, it's all about customer satisfaction, product availability, because with that we know comes the long-term value. We're going to get the turns, we'll get the productivity, Siva, but more importantly, we'll have our customers, and that's why we're in business, to make that real for them. And so I would suggest that the old measures that you might see of aggregate forecast accuracy, maybe they're good for system health monitoring, but they're not going to help you with value. The other bit that I will mention here is, for us, not every forecast, not every SKU is created equal. And so segmenting our analysis and the way we measure success and how we measure forecast accuracy to the SKUs where I made a different business decision, where the forecast only matters is if I chose to buy or deploy inventory differently, right? If I got a fractional improvement on a fractional forecast, but it didn't result in more or less inventory going to a store, doesn't matter, right? And so for us, we have to really look at to what end. And like you said, with intermittent demand SKUs, sometimes it is as simple as choosing 1 or 2 units on the shelf. And what do you need this week? and don't overcomplicate the problem, but use the best data science to make that right, simple decision.
That's a really great point. Not all SKUs are made equal, and you don't need to over-engineer every SKU to the last extent if it's not going to make a material difference in how you place your inventory.
That's right.
Right. So that drastically reduces the problem size that one is dealing with.
That's right.
And everyone in this room, everyone who is at this conference, every retailer knows the importance of this nowadays. There is enough press about these topics, but yet a lot of people are extremely busy to go through a transformation like this, right? There is always a conflicting priority. There is always a technology initiative or ERP initiative that's happening. And you guys managed to pull this through the middle of a pandemic. Who was more busy than Walgreens was during the pandemic, right? So how did you prioritize this? Why did something like this happens to be a priority amongst 1,000 other things that we are doing? And what's your advice for people who is trying to prioritize an initiative like this?
Yeah, it's a matter of is satisfying customer demand a choice that you want to make? Do you want to optimize to that, right? And so I guess we might have viewed it a little bit differently, that it was a must-do. It was an imperative, right? Just like many priorities through the pandemic of staffing warehouses, staffing stores, keeping team members safe, satisfying consumer demand is right up there. It's what we do. And so as a result, that helps us with that level of focus here for an initiative like this. Like you can't operate a business without this. The other element for Walgreens, right, was it's coming on the heels of some broader digital transformations. We had finished up many years of replacing our AS400s and moving to more modern platforms for core retail platforms and for execution. And we realized that with those investments that we could ingest and we could operate at a higher level. But at the end of the day, it's don't stand still in this space. And so I would recommend that the technology is ripe, the partners are waiting and able to help you in your business, and you don't have to have all the answers in this space. But challenging your thought in these ideas and just getting started is the single biggest point of advice in this, and realizing, and it's a bit of humbleness here, right? I talked about not being arrogant, right? Fully understanding your consumer demand is something that you might never achieve. But you have to understand the different influences of that if you're going to steer the business, not just with today's inventory acquisition and allocation, but with even going into your longer range business planning cycles. And so there's so many offshoots and intangible benefits that you can see with an initiative of adopting new technology and that technology to the end of being able to plan your business, Siva.
Excellent. And with this rich knowledge of going through an exercise like this and having exceeded the business case that was in front of you, if you have a time machine and go back, what would you do differently? I assume you would have still selected Antuit as your partner. What would you have done differently?
Well, we would have. I think, like I said earlier, we didn't start early enough. Right? So even though we knew our customer was changing, how we engage, how we talk to, who else is talking or influencing our customer, we were slow to do that. Secondly, I think we were extremely methodical in our testing of the marketplace and testing partners and testing technology. We could have gone faster in that, right? You don't have to test 42 hypotheses at once. You can test 3 big ones with a partner, and if you have the right partnership, you can grow into a deeper and deeper and deeper understanding, because the beauty of the technology, the beauty of the data science that exists is that it will be iterative. It is not static. It is not a once and done project. We didn't put in software and then say, check the box, we're done. Instead, we're thinking about it on an agile deployment of there are causal factors today that will not be causal factors tomorrow. Right? I will not always have global financial markets or geopolitical instability in the same parts of the world or the same communities that exist today that will exist tomorrow. And so it's a realization that the market is also dynamic. And so you don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out because you never will, but you have to build in the agility and just move quicker.
And where do you see the future of demand planning for retail metamorphosizing itself into? Do you see it's achieved a level of maturity? Besides the AI, the implication of what AI can have, where do you see this going?
That's a good question. I think in this space, holistically, retailers need to think beyond their four walls with this. So I talked a lot about the external factors of demand and understanding the influence on customer, but equally the influencers of demand and how supply is actually procured. So with Walgreens, we partner with 4,000 manufacturers and suppliers. My demand plan is only as good as it is utilized in the end-to-end supply chain. Mm-hmm. And so for decades, we've talked about CPFR. Mm-hmm. And I think that the next evolution is how to break down those silos between a supply chain at Walgreens that we're looking after here and trying to operate with our suppliers, but also even extending into how the same demand planning is used for operations. And how are we deploying our labor? How are we planning our labor to work in a DC or to work in stores or micro-fulfillment centers to satisfy the different consumer demand? It's really thinking about your end-to-end enterprise and that flow that I see over the next 3-5 years is one of those next imperatives for us because we're going to continue to be in a period of supply volatility, mm-hmm. and only through that level of collaboration and the same understanding of those external and internal forces and sharing will we be able to help quell some of that volatility.
So for far too long, we always assume that the supply is infinite and it's always available when we have to plan for the demand, and that is changing, and you expect that to continue.
That will be the case. Unfortunately, it is our reality here. And I think that those who adapt to that will be more successful than others in, again, retaining that customer loyalty demand by showing up well and by having the right product.
Excellent. With that, thank you very much, Andy. Really appreciate the conversation. With that, we will start taking some questions, and there are a couple of mics out there. If you can come towards the mic, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them here. Like we said, we will be available in booth number 309 after the session if you want to have a more one-on-one chat, but any question at this point? There is a mic out there. It's in the middle row. Yes, sir.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Ahmed Hussain. I have a question on the velocity. Mm-hmm. As you said, the all items are not equal. So do you do the item ranking? And the second full of the question is, if you don't do it in the software, is there anything that, that can be done to do AI or ML to get the data and use the science to automatically assign the velocity to it?
Yeah, so I would suggest that over the last several years, you need to use multiple variables to segment your SKUs. And like I talked about, understanding the customer solution set in with that. And so that comes with an understanding of demand transferability, right? Which, if a customer finds that an item is out of stock, will they accept the substitute, and what will those substitutes be? As well as the unit velocity, as well as your own internal profitability and several other variables. And so when we think about segmentation, we think about that, but really starting with that solution set in mind to understand how to forecast the demand for the customer need, not necessarily the demand for the customer SKU, and then disaggregate at that point.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. So a little bit about myself. I work for this company called Liquidonate, and we help retailers get access to circular economy solutions. So my question to you is, what does Walgreens do to actually forecast excess inventory or like say retail returns to avoid items from going into waste or like say landfills?
Yeah, so Walgreens has a deep commitment on sustainability. Overall, when we think about our commitment there, that shows up in zero waste to landfill distribution centers and a lot of initiatives within our stores to avoid that obsolescence. The reality and the nature of our business is that more often than not, we can influence and shape demand to avoid product ending up in a landfill or avoiding that end of life. By the nature of our business, most of our products have longer shelf dating, right? That also helps with that, with most pharmaceuticals as well as over-the-counter medicines having multiple years from date of manufacture that they can be safely consumed by our consumers. So for us, we take a look, again, with all of our demand planning to obviously avoid that, but also proactively move through excess pools of inventory through incenting our customers, localized markdowns, mass personalized offers to move through at a store SKU level those excess pools of inventory to avoid that waste. As always, right, every retailer wants to do right by the planet, right, but also by doing good business, and we think we can do both.
Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you for your talk. And I have a question more on the change management piece. And as a demand planner myself, at a company that currently that process is run out of, by analysts and teams who are resistant to the AI/ML process. What lessons did you take from trying to either analyst in the middle on your forecasts, or what was that process on the change management side to adoption of these forecasts?
Yeah, the simple answer was the test and learn cycle with real data against our current performance. Right, the proof is in the pudding when you put real numbers to it, and for us to be really tactical, doing live backcasting exercises between current systems, current user overrides, for us, Antuit and even other suppliers in the market was paramount to earning the trust by showing a differentiated value, but also creating an iterative cycle of, if we were seeing differentiated results, understanding why, and if they were worse, challenging ourselves with different hypotheses to understand in that learning journey. But quite candidly, the results when we were talking with live data in our proof of concepts and through deployment really spoke for themselves in that change adoption curve, because traditional demand planners and analysts, they really like to be right? And if they can find ways to be right more often, they'll tend to adopt more frequently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's good.
Hey, one more. How you doing? I'm Alex. I work at IBM. Question for you. We're talking a lot about supply chain and volatility of product. Do your models ever take into the account of local weather conditions? And if so, how exactly are you modeling that? Where's the data come from for that?
Well, I'm not going to go through the actual code for it, but,
of course
but yes, so localized weather does drive, but if you really study weather, you'll also know that the way the weather forecast is delivered through media and the news also equally influences consumer demand. If consumers are hearing that it is the driest drought in history, boy, they might be a little thirstier, right? If we're talking about the localized weather patterns, but also the alerts around weather and the advanced notification of severe weather, whether that weather materializes or not is also a driver on localized demand. The hurricane cone moving around is absolutely taken into account into the models for forecasting, that if you think a hurricane is bearing down in your Florida home, you're going to go out and prepare at Walgreens and other food and drug and mass retailers. If that cone moves and you end up getting no rain, you still need to understand what caused that demand. And so all of that is internalized into our models.
Gotcha. And as far as the priority aisles for Walgreens, whether it's front of store or back of the house for RX pharmacy, well, are you applying any sort of weather information onto those moments?
Yeah, so we ingest live weather actuals as well as forecasts and alerts into our forecasting models, which are updated daily, which change replenishment daily to how we deploy inventory.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. I mean, like two questions.
Sure.
One is if you could actually share some numbers in terms of what was the out of stock in production since your software, was implemented. And second question is, which SKUs were the most? Where did you see the most improvement in terms of like which SKUs, and which SKUs were the not so good ones?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good area. So, again, from a solution success measure, we're measuring most on customer satisfaction, customer retention. We did see an in-stock improvement where we do have supply, and we're seeing I'll just leave it at hundreds of items, fewer out of stock in our stores as a result of getting more accurate forecasts on any given day, which is meaningful to our customer base. And when we think about that proposition, that's where this really matters, right? Is satisfying that overall consumer demand across those solutions, and that might mean satisfying that consumer demand with an alternate solution that might better meet that demand in some cases. A meaningful amount, yes. A meaningful amount.
Are there any questions? Excellent. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate your time, and thanks for doing this just before lunch. We are available in booth 309, and we would welcome any further conversations you have. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate your time.